Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this October 3rd, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can catch my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's Pacific time on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Yesterday, from my perspective, I did a show on basically the state of the mainstream and the alternative media, specifically radio stations, several newspapers, etc., leaving out a lot of the YouTube broadcasts and things that people now do that kind of bypasses all that. You really don't need to be on a radio station anymore. It's getting down to that point. And, maybe for the better. The point I was trying to make yesterday was that I came up from the mainstream media, and so I got a taste of the lies in the mainstream media firsthand, and then I went over and worked in the alternative media, American Free Press, found out they were nothing but a controlled opposition newspaper. I used the Vatican story as a litmus test for that, by the way, and I learned about that when I worked in Rome for 6 years during the mid-'80s. Now, when I went over to Republic Broadcasting Network, my first experience on the alternative side, that was in Austin, Texas, as well as Genesis Communications Network. You probably know them. Alex Jones broadcasts there. My show used to be after his. And I found out they were basically controlled opposition themselves. And I also used the Vatican story as a litmus test for that. And they don't want to hear it, basically. So basically they're protecting their, let's just say their boss. They want to protect that side of the story. A little bit leaks out here and there, and today, same stations do the same thing. So then I talked about the recent experience I had with this American Freedom Radio, and guy who used to be the program director for RBN now is running that. And I always said, I always liked Danny Romero. I always did, but I got a little upset when one of his broadcasters asked me to do a show, and he presented it to Danny. And I said, yeah, I'd help him along. I can do another show here and there. And he didn't even have the courtesy to contact me. He said, no, you know what, we don't need anything. And I knew something was up. And so I said, basically, it's got to be the Vatican stories. They don't want it. I checked out their playlist. They talk about it a little bit, but they do not go in depth on it. And I use that as a litmus test. And why? I think it's because the advertising. You won't get advertising when you deal with this story. And so that was my discussion yesterday. And it's funny, when I was looking, when they kicked me off RBN because of all these Vatican stories, they took all my archives down. Now, Genesis left them up, and somebody recovered them and sent them, and you can find them on arcticbeacon.com, some of them. But, maybe it's serendipitous, but all of a sudden I found a year's worth of RBN's old shows. Somebody had saved them, and I got them to me. Isn't that ridiculous? So I got a year's worth that I just put on my website that if you go to RBN's archives, they deleted. And so thank you for that. I got those back. The point of the story is, now people say, well, why do you get so upset about this? Why would you even bring these guys into it? Don't leave them. Who cares about them? In the sense is, who cares about, it shows you exactly what the state of the press is. The idea should be that all stories get fair coverage and a person gets a chance to see them and make up his own mind. But you can't get the story on the table in depth. You can get pieces here and there. And most of them say, well, there's a good side to the Vatican and a bad side. Well, that's not true. Of course, the underlings have no idea what's going on, and they perform a lot of good deeds as fronts. They have front charities, things like that, to make them seem like they're a good organization. But behind the scenes, you'll learn that it has been the Antichrist depicted in the book of Revelation since the beginning of time, since the beginning of their origins. And that's the difference. No one wants a real, and then they don't want to get into the real connection between all of our politicians and this organization. Now, I have researched it for over 20 years, and I think I'm well able to talk about it in a open sense in a rational sense. And in a sense, you got to understand journalists too, for example, like me. Certain stories you latch onto become like your children. This was one of them. And another one happens to be the framing of the Tony Alamo ministry, a Christian ministry in this country. And boy, that one is the same to me. And so when some people over like at RBN or at this American Freedom Radio don't like my children, I get a little upset about it. And so that's what I'm talking about here. So I'll leave it at that. But you know what? It brought to mind, and as I started looking at some of these stories that I was doing back in 2006, I thought I'd replay one because it was quite interesting. And hopefully I can get through it all today. And in January of 2006, I interviewed someone by the name of Eric Orion. Now, that was, I knew when I said that name, he wanted to use a pen name, and for good reason. But since then, his name, and I kept his real name out, but since then his name is out there. It's Berman. And it was quite an interesting story, and he sent me the copy of his book, which was not published at the time, but is published now. So in January 17, 2006, I interviewed him on Republic Broadcasting Network. And basically the story goes like this, and it's quite interesting. In 1998, Eric Orion, or Berman of Florida, was 29, and he began dating a girl whose 6'4", 90-year-old father, who he said possessed the largest hands he'd ever had, and called him Big Ed, as he was known locally, was actually Otto Skorzeny, who was the bodyguard of Hitler. He was the legendary SS commando of World War II, personal bodyguard of Adolf Hitler, and subsequent lifelong CIA operative who was given a new identity and lived in Florida. Now, he met Skorzeny on his deathbed, and I guess Skorzeny wanted to set the record straight to someone, and he gave him a shoebox full of pictures and told him some incredible stories. And let me just outline this, and then we can listen to the interview I did. And some of the major explosive highlights of Skorzeny's revelations include that the true identity of George Herbert Walker Bush, who was, of course, our 41st President of the United States, alleged to have been brought into America with Skorzeny as his bodyguard and covertly adopted by trading with the enemy. As convicted, Prescott Bush was basically his adopted father. Skorzeny claimed that George Bush's real birth name was George H. Scherff, Scherff Jr., son of George Scherff Sr., and a German-born assistant to the inventor Nikola Tesla. Young George allegedly spent his first years in America snooping around Tesla's lab, helping his father in the 1930s steal or glean whatever they could of Tesla's work and report back to Germany. Tesla had casually remarked to an artisan couple named Ray, who had recently emigrated to the United States, of this mischievous and devious prying nature of this little monkey. And that's where this, I did a story after this called Curious George, and it was a story about the inventor. Remember the monkey, Curious George? And the guy who created him was strangely found murdered, and this monkey's supposed to be George Bush. It's really interesting. Around his lab, whom he had dubbed Curious George. That's Tesla. Okay, Skorzeny's role, another thing came out in the assassination of Nikola Tesla, suffocation on January 6, 1943, after tricking Tesla on January 5th into revealing the full details of some of his most valuable discoveries. 3, that they faked in 1945 the suicide of Hitler in the Berlin bunker, and corroborating a 1948 CIA interrogation of Gestapo chief Heinrich Müller. and Scorzeni's pivotal role in consolidating the intelligence assets of Nazi Gestapo and Nazi-infiltrated OSS, Central Intelligence, in 1947, working with George Herbert Walker Bush, Nazi infiltrator whose real name was George H. Scherf Jr., born to an accountant of Tesla, instead of Prescott Bush, and Nazi SS spy master Reinhard Gehlen. While Bill Donovan compromised the fifth column, and all these guys, Alan Foster Dulles, Skorzeny claims a central responsibility for setting up the Odessa operation to surreptitiously relocate 50,000 Nazis into North and South America, and on and on. Skorzeny's claimed that Reinhard Gehlen, Mengele, and George H. Bush directly participated in the assassination of Kennedy. So these are a few of the things that came out from this encounter that Eric Orion supposedly had. I had interviewed him in January of 2006. After that, I remember writing a story about the death of this man, Curious, who was the illustrator of Curious George the Monkey, who was actually George Bush. And I can read that to you at another time, or you can look it up in my archives. But after that, a guy named Don Nikoloff in 2007 wrote a very in-depth and good article expanding on a lot of this stuff, showing the credibility of this man, Orion, because a lot of guys questioned him when he first came on my show, and I think I was one of the first to interview him, and they questioned, this is crazy. But Nikoloff went ahead and did an in-depth story that appeared in the Idaho Observer, which was a truth-telling paper, and actually one of the few. It doesn't exist any longer, but it's one of the few true truth newspapers, and I know because I knew the publisher and his wife quite well. But anyway, then if you want to see another in-depth piece, a guy by the name of Ken Adachi did it on his website, Educate Yourself, The Revelations of Otto Skorzeny, Part 1 and Part 2, and a couple other things. He went and he started talking about a lot of the things that Nikoloff uncovered when he did his story. So I wanted to go back and replay that interview, which to me was one of my favorite along the way, and the reason I'm doing it is because it was kind of serendipitous over the last couple days of me talking regarding the state of the alternative media and what's really going on, and people getting under my skin, because I'm really like these stories that you'll see as a journalist, a couple along the way you latch onto, and they become like your children. And like I said, when you offend somebody's child, you get them pretty upset. And so I usually get upset when I realize my shows and things get blocked by people who don't want to get, into the mess, when they do not want to rely on the first precept of journalism. And when there's credible information and factual information on stories that are uncomfortable, that's what the freedom of press is all about, stories that are uncomfortable and go against the mainstream, they have to be told along with the other stories, so people have the right to make up their own mind and become free thinkers. Don't rely on anybody else, but you got to have all the information on. So when people start censoring these stories, not this one particularly, but the one about the real story about the Vatican, and also much about the Tony Alamo ministry and other of these ministries that have been targeted by the New World Order, the Vatican-led New World Order, I get a bit upset. I have nothing personal against the people I talk about. Danny Romero, one of his broadcasters over there, I mentioned his name, Mitch, who I believe, didn't realize a lot of things that went on behind the scenes at RBN. But anyway, I've been doing this for a while, and I'll tell you what. The idea that the alternative media has gotten better over the years is just the same as the mainstream media has gotten worse over the years. So is the alternative media. Somebody named my show The Alternative to the Alternative Media, and I didn't do that. Someone else did. But anyway, let's get back to this interview I did on RBN on January 17th, 2006 with Mr. Eric Orion.
In a growing listenership, people love to hear the truth. They love to listen to stories that they haven't heard on the mainstream media and be shocked by the information that's really out there that's being kept from the American people. You know something? Don't forget tomorrow, 12 to 2 hours with Zvali, a middle management, former member of the Illuminati, the enlightened ones, the chosen ones, member of the family, the order, as they're called by insiders, and you're going to be shocked at how organized these people are. I was shocked. I knew their organization. I was familiar with it, I should add, 25 years ago when they were, when I was researching this in Rome and looked into their organization in Europe, and then also asked whether they were in America. Of course they are. And they've been firmly rooted here for a long, long time. One of the members of the Illuminati is, of course, is George H. Bush and the Bush family. And today I'm going to delve into a story with a gentleman by the name of Eric Orion, who's written a book. He's with us right now. And be patient, Eric. I'll get you in a second. And if I talk too long, we'll get to you after the break. But anyway, I got to do a little bit of an introduction here because, you know, tomorrow I'm going to talk to Zvali on the New World Order. And I mean, in terms that you normally don't hear. We hear generalities. We hear about the secret sects, the secret cults. But Zvali's going to talk about it from personal experience, her daily activities, so to speak, and also from the time she was initiated at the Vatican. And that is a very dark and deep and haunting ceremony that you're going to want to listen to. But anyway, it all boils down to specifics, and this is what I have on today, a show regarding the specifics of some of the Bush family New World Order antics and many other things. Eric Orion has written a book that is not published yet. He is basically I have a little letter here. He says, I'm looking for an experienced liberal publisher who is not afraid of the Bush family New World Order. Good luck. I would love to go on Larry King Live or similar venue to discuss my book and profound claims. Good luck with Larry King. I mean, he's very good friends with George H. Bush, I believe. They're always on talking, and Larry lives in this $1 million house. I don't think he's going to want to listen to this, but anyway, you never know, and I would hope that Mr. King would have you on, Eric. I'll get to you in a second. But anyway, this book, I tell you, is shocking. When I looked at it, it's been sitting in my desk for a while. I've read most of it, and there are just some really shocking things in here. And it talks about basically this. Eric had a girlfriend who was, her father was a man by the name of Otto Skorzeny. Now, Otto Skorzeny is a high-ranking Nazi that was given asylum here in America, and he went undercover as a new identity and was allowed to stay in this country through American ties in the Illuminati. This story takes place with Eric meeting Otto, Otto giving Eric some deathbed information that's contained in this book that you're not going to get anywhere else regarding George H. Bush, which is going to shock you, maybe. And also pictures that have never been disclosed of Bush and a number of these Nazi sympathizers. We're going to get back to Eric Orion after this break on the Investigative Journal.
Okay, so there we go. We got Eric Orion, and I'm going to kind of bypass this break. If I could, I'll go real quickly here and move forward and see if we can continue.
Soon to be, it says here, local inventor, soon to be published author, and it talks about this book, The Bush Connection, a controversial book yet to be published. So Eric is here, and he was even being promoted by his local Florida paper. I did want to read this about the book. This was in the introduction to give you an idea, and then turn it over to Eric and tell us about this fascinating story. The book took more than 5 years of painstaking research to complete. It was written to help prove prove that the American CIA, OSI, FBI, U.S. Navy, and U.S. Air Force have been lying to the American people and the world since April 8, 1945, about the identities and whereabouts of Nazis living in America today. Germany never actually surrendered at the end of World War II. Allegedly, George H.W. Bush pulled the all-time fast one on the American public and the rest of the free world. He, with the help from thousands of rich Republican Nazi sympathizers in the U.S. government, illegally brought 50,000-plus murdering Nazis to America, not just rocket scientists, gave them fake American identities and jobs meant for American citizens. Okay, Eric had the opportunity to meet one, Otto Skorzeny. Tell us about this story, Eric. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Greg. How are you today?
I'm real good. Go ahead. Tell us about this story, how you met Skorzeny, who he is, and how this book came about, and some of the major points in it.
I'd say a big one over here. Several years ago, a former girlfriend of mine, her father, elderly father, made a quote-unquote deathbed confession to me, claiming to be Hitler's bodyguard, a former SS Nazi commando Otto Skorzeny, and he claimed to have been and helped start basically the CIA along with George Herbert Walker Bush. Through my meetings with Otto Skorzeny, he gave me a shoebox full of 60 years worth of photos of wanted SS Nazi war criminals who he personally helped hide and escape while working as a CIA agent in regard to Operation Paperclip and the Odessa. All right. He also told me some amazing stories about some CIA stuff and secret background and other information that has never been disclosed about the Bush family and George Herbert Walker Bush. All right. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I put together a book based upon exactly what Otto Skorzeny had told me and the photos that he had given me. I did a lot of research and I got my book copyrighted. It's called thebushconnection.com. Some of the never before published information includes the identities and American aliases of several wanted Nazi war criminals, SS Nazi war criminals, who are supposed to be dead according to our CIA written history books. All right. Also, I have information directly from Otto Skorzeny that George Herbert Walker Bush, the president's father, was actually adopted.
Okay, we're going to stop right there. I got to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with Eric Orion and the Bush Connection. Since that interview I did in 2006, his book is published. You can get it at the book bushconnection.com if you want to go look at it. And like I mentioned, also find Don Nikoloff's story. That'll be on the internet somewhere, that he did a year later. Went more in depth than I did. I did a radio interview with this man and put him out there. And then you can go to Educate Yourself. Ken Adachi did a whole bunch of stuff on it to get yourself up to speed. But it's a good story. We'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
Hey, we're back on the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this November 3rd, 2015 day in our calendar. Let's get back to Eric O'Ryan in this 2006 interview I did on January 17th regarding his book, The Bush Connection, and how he met Otto Skorzeny. And he left off saying that Skorzeny told him that Bush was adopted. Let's move forward.
Skorzeny is claiming that George Herbert Walker Bush is really the son of Nikola Tesla's illegal immigrant German-born accountant, George H. Scherff, that's S-C-H-E-R-F-F, Sr. I'm claiming that Skorzeny is claiming that George Herbert Walker Bush is really George H. Scherff, Jr., the son of Nikola Tesla's illegal immigrant German-born accountant.
Okay, just hold on. Just make sure you stay close to your phone. And secondly, let's go back a minute. When you met Skorzeny, how old was he?
Approximately 90 years old.
And Skorzeny said he was in America how long?
Since 1945.
And how was he brought here?
He had surrendered to the Americans after World War II, and he was acquitted of committing war crimes during the Nuremberg trials. And after the Nuremberg trials, after being acquitted, he basically went to the CIA and disappeared.
Okay, and he's brought here. Now tell us the significance of Otto Skorzeny and his role, his high-ranking role in the SS, in the Nazis, so people get an idea how powerful this man was.
Well, he was, first of all, he stood over 6 foot 4 inches tall. He was a giant for his time back then. He was Hitler's personal right-hand man and bodyguard. All right, Skorzeny received worldwide acclaim for rescuing Mussolini from captivity by flying into the Grand Sasso Alps, where Mussolini was being held in captivity at the Hotel de Campo. And he flew in with a team of gliders, with a squadron, silently at nighttime atop this mountain. And he kicked open the door of the radio room, machine gunned the radios, and single-handedly grabbed Mussolini and made a getaway flight with the waiting aircraft. He had a Storch aircraft waiting for him, and he flew Mussolini back to Hitler to safety.
Huh. Now, I know you don't want to give out the name that he was given. His identity was changed in order to protect his family, some of which were your former girlfriend who's still alive. When was the last time you saw Skorzeny alive?
As far as I know, he died December 31st, 1999. He got cremated. I have a copy of his death certificate, and I've seen his ashes. But who knows, with the CIA, according to them, he had died in 1975, according to the history books.
Okay, now, you are going out with his daughter, was it, or
Yes,
what?
yes, one of his daughters at the time, yes. Not anymore, but at the time, yes.
All right, and now, why do you think that Skorzeny would tell you all this stuff? Why do you think he confided in you?
He knew that I'm Jewish, first of all. I'm an honest guy, and he thought I would really try to do something about this and bring some justice to these wanted Nazi war criminals. His whole goal was they had screwed him over, including George Bush. They screwed him over and out of large sums of money over the years. This was his one last way of getting even with them.
So basically, he'd been cheated by the Bush. He thought he was cheated by the Bush family, and wanted to get back at them some way.
Yes.
Okay. Now he's. What made you believe this story? I mean, was he still coherent at in his old age? Was he still able to recall things? Was he still in his right mind?
He was still very focused and very lucid. And he was still very mobile. He was able to walk around. He was still very impressive. When I first met him, he towered over me. I'm about 5'8", and he had the largest hands I'd ever shaken. He was still very big and impressive at an rape old age of 90.
Now, so you...
I'm sorry.
You believed him then, correct?
After I did a little research and looked into some of the history books and saw some of the old photos, then I realized, yes, I'm talking to someone who's supposed to be dead, according to the history books.
Did you ever ask him about that?
Yes.
What did he say? I didn't come back from the dead.
He said, of course, he said the CIA faked his death, along with a whole bunch of other wanted SS Nazi war criminals.
Now, during the years that Skorzeny, from 75 to now, what was his activities? I mean, what was he doing? Did he ever get into that? How did he live?
He lived as a carpenter. That was his cover. He was a contractor. He built houses. And he was just, you would never know by outward appearances anything about him other than he just looked like a tall, old, skinny man. But
did he keep his contacts with the Bush administration and other Nazi war criminals around the country, or did he basically stay isolated?
He kept his contacts. Sure, he was an active member of he's a retired CIA spook. A spook is a CIA agent who had his death faked and still operates. But the government denies he exists, so he can get away with all kinds of crimes if he wanted to.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you these questions just because I know there's always doubting Thomases that are listening and people that, when they hear stories like this. Now, you would promise to tell the truth and the whole truth and be subpoenaed and give this testimony in a court of law, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Now, would you be willing to take a military lie detector test that was credible?
Yes.
Okay. So you would be willing to do that. This story is not made up on your part.
No.
Okay. Now, let's get into Skorzeny in the last couple minutes before our break, and then some of the allegations he made about the Bush family. You meet Skorzeny, he gives you all this information. It must have scared the living you-know-what out of you after you had these pictures and all this information. What were your thoughts after that on what to do with it?
My thoughts were that I needed to try to bring these wanted SS Nazi war criminal Holocaust killers, terrorists, basically, to justice. So I wanted to call our government and tell them, hey, they're still alive. I wanted to bring them to justice. That was my whole intention.
Now, you knew you were playing with fire here. I mean, it's nothing new that the Bush family is quite powerful. Other members in our government don't want this information to come across. I know we only have a few seconds here before the break. If you hear the music, we'll get back to you afterwards. But what was your first reaction when you did go to the authorities with this information, or did you go to the authorities with this information?
Yes, I initially contacted or tried to contact Eli Rosenbaum, who is the director of the United States Justice Department Office of Special Investigations.
Okay, book that centers around the deathbed testimony of one Otto Skorzeny a top-level SS man who was once the bodyguard of Hitler. You were talking about when you first contacted the Justice Department about these pictures and this incredible information. What kind of response did you receive?
Basically, they thought it was a hoax, and they told me that I was mistaken, and that according to the CIA, all of them were all dead, and I was mistaken. That's what they told me. I was wrong.
All right, so you didn't get any cooperation from them, which is not surprising. What was your next move?
Well, later that night, I was over at Scorzeni's house, and his widow received a phone call that turned her white, and she almost passed out. Basically, someone from the OSI tipped her off that I had contacted them, and that I had known about them. All right. Yeah. Later that night, when I was coming back home, a car pulled up behind me, flashing his lights, wanting me to pull over. I pulled over. I knew something was probably going on, so I was ready. Someone walked up next to me. It looked like he had a gun in his hand, possibly, so I sped away. All right. My girlfriend was in the car at the time. All right, and I sped through 3 lanes of traffic and went into a local shopping center, and he pulled right behind me. He gave me a dirty look, then he pulled a couple feet away, then he drove off. But I'm sure they tried to put a hit out on me. That's what it was. I'm sure of that.
Okay, so basically, was the girlfriend you were with, was that Scorzeni's daughter?
Yes.
Now, did you have conversations with her about the real identity of her father?
No. She didn't know that I knew. She didn't know that her father told me all this. That's why I'm no longer going out. She broke up with me when the government tipped her off that I wrote a book about her family.
Okay. So you didn't, that was a very touchy situation there then, correct?
Yes.
All right. Scorzeni then basically was jilted by the Bush family with money he thought he was owed. He tells you this incredible story right before he dies, gives you a whole shoebox full of pictures, and I'm looking at some of them. One page I'm on, I think it's page 9 here. Scorzeni talks about, did he tell you about what really happened to Hitler?
According to Otto Scorzeni, okay, the day of Hitler's alleged suicide, Hannah Reich, who was a female SS Nazi pilot, flew to the Führer bunker to allegedly try to talk Hitler out of killing himself. All right, you can find that information in the history books, but then she claims that she was not unable to talk him out of committing suicide, so she flew off alone, and then Adolf allegedly put a gun to his right temple and blew his brains out. Okay, if you look at the picture of the bogus, well, actually, here's what happened. Okay, Hitler did not commit suicide. All right, Otto Scorzeni and Hitler flew off with Hannah Reich to Austria. Before they flew off, they shot a Hitler look-alike right between the eyes. If you look at the published photos of the Hitler's corpse, he has a bullet hole right between his eyes, and it looks nothing like Hitler. And that's how Hitler faked his death.
And Scorzeni told you this.
Yes. And I have photos that are also in my book of Otto Scorzeni in 1997 with Adolf Hitler sitting there. And it was
97?
Yeah, 1997, yes.
Oh, my God.
And he is over 107 years old at the time. I'm alleging that Hitler actually died at 114 years old as the oldest man in America in February of 2004. I'm alleging that his name is William Coates, Coates, according to Otto Scorzeni.
114 this man lived?
That's what I'm alleging, yes. And that's in my book, and there's a photo of him in there with Otto Scorzeni taken at Montana in Glacier National Park and McDonald Lodge.
Now, would Scorzeni agree with you? Did he tell you that?
Yeah.
Well, anything's possible. I mean, people do live, they say the good die young, so perhaps that is true, but that's just, we'll leave that go. We could spend a whole hour just talking about that. Let's get on to George Bush, how Bush plays into this whole story. You get to, I believe you start talking first, you mentioned earlier. Let me get out the phone number for the second half hour, 800-313-9443. You're alleging Scorzeni told you that Bush actually wasn't the son of Prescott Bush, but actually the son of Nikola Tesla's accountant, George Abe Scherff, Schreff Sr., correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, now put me back in that room where Scorzani was, his house, telling you this story. How did he relate this to you?
After he had given me the shoebox, I was full of photos. I was going through the photos. He was telling me a little bit about each one, and I came across some of the ones of young George Herbert Walker Bush. On the back of the photos, it also said Sheriff Jr., George H. Sheriff Jr. Then he told me all about who George H. Herbert Walker Bush really was.
Okay, just hold that, because I know I want to listen to that, and let's hopefully this 3 minutes goes by quickly. We're going to take a break.
Boy, they did a lot of breaks back then. You know, every time they did a break, I think I went and got a glass of water or something. I remember now I do shows where I don't get many breaks. But anyway, you get to listen to more. Let's see if we can jump through this.
Eric Orion on it.
Back to him. Back to the music.
Okay, let's get right back at it. We're talking to Eric Orion and his really controversial book, The Bush Connection. And, we might as well just tell the jury of American public opinion out there that, some people are going to look at this story and say that you are a disinformation artist trying to lead people off into a wrong direction, a wild goose chase. Other people are going to swear by what you say. I say, the truth lies somewhere between here and Mongolia, and we need to hear everything and listen to everyone's stories. You spent 6 years of your life researching this, telling me you weren't going to do that, and you are telling the truth, and we are going to give you your forum as we should. Now, we were talking about, just pick up where we left off. You were in the room with Scorzani telling us about George H. Sheriff, not President Bush, actually former President Bush, not being the son of Prescott Bush. Tell us, pick it up right there, Eric.
Well, basically, he was Scorzani had claimed that when George Herbert Walker Bush was young, I guess about the age of 14, he was working for Nikola Tesla, but his real name was not Bush. That was not his last name. It was Sheriff, George H. Sheriff Jr. All right, George H. Sheriff Jr., and his father were stealing inventions from Nikola Tesla to give to Adolf Hitler to help him win World War II. Okay, eventually, Nazis, Otto Scorzani and Reinhard Gehlen murdered Nikola Tesla. Okay, the history books claim that Nikola Tesla died in his sleep. No, that's not what happened. Scorzani personally murdered Dr. Nikola Tesla, along with his comrade, Reinhard Gehlen. They stole his best inventions to give to Adolf Hitler. Okay, then Otto Scorzani, along with the whole SS Gestapo, after World War II, merged the SS Gestapo with the American OSS to form the CIA. And that's how the CIA came about, with stolen Tesla technology and stolen Holocaust money.
Now now Scorzani told you that he actually killed Tesla, right?
Both of them, yes. He actually claimed to have killed Nikola Tesla after he told him all about his inventions, and he left with blueprints of his best, most secret inventions.
Interesting. I'm looking at a picture on page 13 of your book here. You are a bad boy, George, and it shows a picture, looks like a home picture of, it's a sheriff standing on the left, 14-year-old George H. Bush in the middle, along with Prescott Bush in 1938 in Germany. Correct? You remember that photo?
I'm looking at that. It's Otto Scorzani standing on the left, and young George Bush is in the center with Prescott allegedly on the right.
Okay. Now, did he ever comment on that picture?
I don't have any comments other than Otto Scorzani is who he says he is, and he was a direct connection to the Bushes his entire life. He was basically George Herbert Walker Bush's bodyguard. Along with being Hitler's bodyguard, he watched over George Herbert Walker Bush, too.
Okay, now how did Bush, according to Scorzani, get away with this change of identity, and how did he come over here to America? How did Prescott Bush get involved? Did he get into the specifics of this story? And have you tried to verify this with birth certificates?
Yeah, a couple of things. I did contact the Milton, Massachusetts Office of Vital Statistics, and I did obtain a certified copy or an official-looking copy of a birth certificate for George Herbert Walker Bush, evidencing that he was in fact born to Prescott Bush in the United States, but of course that was easy to fake. What happened when George changed his name to Bush after he left working for Nikola Tesla? Okay, he forged a birth certificate evidencing he was older to join the Navy. Okay, when he was only like I think 16 when he joined the Navy, but he put down he was 18. But he said his name was not sure if he put down Bush on there, and that's how this whole masquerade got started.
Now, was he connected with the Prescott back then?
Oh yeah. See, Prescott was a Nazi sympathizer. Okay, and he was convicted for training with the Nazis during World War II. Prescott Bush, a lot of people don't know this, but he ran the Union Banking Corporation, and Hitler was sending stolen Holocaust money to Prescott Bush to launder to help save to create a Fourth Reich in America. All right, Roosevelt found out about this, and he had him arrested and had his company seized under the Trading with the Enemy Act. All right, so Prescott was a convicted Nazi, and they had lots of Nazi sympathizers in the Navy and the whole U.S. government to help young George Bush along with his lie throughout his whole military career.
Huh. Now, so he apparently then he adopted George H. Bush, correct? Yes. According to Scorzeni.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the question becomes, this is probably the most controversial part, one of the most controversial points in your book. What has been the reaction from people? I know you've talked to a lot of people about this. What have you uncovered recently about this? Are you getting any closer to getting solid proof? Or is the Bush administration, are they aware of you, I guess?
The Bush administration is very aware of me. Right after my copyright was issued, I received a notice from the local postmaster of Palm Beach County notifying me that someone in various states, or various people in different states, allegedly received threatening mail from me, all right, with my post office box as a return address, and they were going to launch some kind of investigation. Since then, my mail has been stamped ground freight only. My priority mail will not be air flown. It only goes by the ground. And sometimes it gets opened, and sometimes it never arrives at all.
So they're watching you pretty closely.
I would think so. I'm on a no-fly list. All right, and I contacted the TSA, but
they're on a no-fly list.
Yeah, they put me on a no-fly list.
Now, you know something? There's a civil rights violation if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. But I contacted the TSA underneath the Freedom of Information Act request, and their letter states that, it says, in regard to no-fly list, the TSA does not disclose the names and identifying information of individuals on the watch list. So they're not going to tell me if my name's on there or not. So that means, of course, I'm on there.
So when's the last time you went to the airport?
I haven't flown in years. I don't like to fly, for one thing.
Okay. Before you got involved in this, and Scorzeni told you all this stuff, what were you doing? What's your background? I mean, people are going to wonder about you just because, you were in I guess either in the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time, however you look at it. But tell me what you were like prior to this, what you were doing.
My background, first of all, I'm 38 years old. I'm Jewish. I'm a former Eagle Scout. I have a BA in marketing. I'm also a licensed mortgage broker and a licensed real estate broker. So I was selling real estate and brokering mortgages in the state of Florida when this came along.
Now, were you ever involved in any groups or anything that may benefit from this type of information if it is not real? I mean, people are going to question you, so deeply. They're going to know what color socks you wear every day. So tell us a little bit about your motivations. I mean, is there any deep political motivations people would find out about if they searched your background?
I've never been involved in any organization. This is something I took it upon myself to do.
Now I'm going to break it off right there, and I'm going to finish this up tomorrow. We got a little bit more of to go with Eric O'Ryan. And there's some really startling information that I hadn't mentioned, so make sure you go to thebushconnection.com. I should get in touch with him again if I can. It's almost 10 years now, but the book is out, and incredible story about Bush, and it goes in depth about certain things that happened in the Navy where supposedly he was told by Skorzeny that Bush deliberately killed 2 crew members of his Avenger by bailing out of a perfectly good airplane to become a war hero. So we will discuss that a little bit more, and I'll give you some tomorrow I'll give you a couple links to go to so you can catch that story, and I'll put that on my website. So go to arcticbeacon.com. Have a good evening and good night.